everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Beautiful You. I'm your host, Avantika. Today, we have a very special guest with her. Her name is Amanda Gilchrist. She's a licensed professional counselor, supervisor, consultant, and a business owner. She specializes in depression, anxiety, life transitions, and trauma. She uses a person centered approach to tailor therapeutic interventions to the needs of each individual based on their identified goals. While she juggles many roles, she's currently defining these roles and leaning into necessities such as balance and connection. She enjoys new experiences, creating memories through travel, and I'm absolutely so stoked to have her on the podcast. Before we dive into this episode, you guys know I advocate for therapy all the time. Beautiful You encourages you to seek the right professional help and care for you. This is where Amaha comes in. Amaha is a mental health care organization offering scientifically driven and evidence based high quality care through therapy, psychiatry, their community support, and self care app. Whether you're dealing with anxiety, depression, or any other severe condition, Amaha has about 140 plus psychologists and psychiatrists working to support you. You can access therapy and psychiatry services online as well as in person through their centers in Bangalore, Delhi, and Mumbai. Beautiful You listeners get a special discount. Use the code BY50 to get 50% off your first session with Amaha. Just download their app. It's called Amaha, AMAHA, or visit their website to book your first session with Amaha. And if you know someone who is struggling with mental health, share the love and the discount. Let's make mental health care accessible for everyone together. Invest in your mental health. You deserve it. Welcome, Amanda. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm actually really honored to be here. Always love to be able to sit and really have these really important, crucial conversations and just kind of show up as ourselves, right?
Right, absolutely. So today we are going to talk about a term called as head trash. When Amanda and I, we were talking about what are the possible, like we were just talking about our work with each other, and she mentioned a term called head trash, which is what we'll get into. We'll talk about negative thoughts, how to tackle them, our language to ourselves, how important it is, and our self-image. So yeah, let's get into it. I'm so excited to dive into this episode. To begin with, head trash is a very compelling term. So, for the listeners out there, could you dwell into that and explain what head trash means?
Yes. So first, the key term there is trash, right? And
Yeah.
head just tells you where it's at. And so automatically when we think of trash, we think of something that needs to be thrown out, right? Something that's disposable, probably not good for us. We don't need it. And I am a person like of analogies. And so I really thought about like what these beliefs that we have, what do they do, right? And are they serving us? Are they serving us well? Do we need them? Do we not need them? Do we need to get rid of them? And I'm always likened to a trash can, right? Where everyone generally has like a trash can that has a lid on it. It might be in a closet, but generally people hide the trash, right?
Right. Yeah.
For a while, that's okay. But if you never take it out,
Mm-hmm.
it still impacts the space that it's in, right? And so I liken those negative thoughts to head trash, right?
Mm-hmm.
That maybe nobody can see them. They're there. We don't always notice them, right? It's not just like one of those things you can automatically put your hands on, depending on how it's disguised.
Mm-hmm.
And even still, it can like really impact your head, right? The space that you're in, your ability to move forward, your ability to love yourself, your ability to engage in healthy relationships. And so head trash is all the things that aren't serving us well
Mm-hmm.
that we need to get rid of.
Absolutely. So that's interesting. So I have talked about like negative thoughts on the podcast before and how important, your language is to yourself. Head trash is a very interesting term that you use, and I absolutely agree with you. When it's being stored and when it's not taken out or addressed on time, it can impact your mental health. Could you tell us more about why it is so crucial to address it and how it can impact one's mental well-being?
Absolutely. So it's so important to address it because our thoughts, right? Our beliefs and our thoughts are the framework for how we behave, right? How we engage with others, what we believe about ourselves, what we believe about others. And it can completely change the trajectory of your life, right? But we keep hearing so many times out there, like Nike has the just do it, right? And people are like, well, if you want to do something, just make it happen.
Right.
And honestly, right, the behavior is the foundation are those beliefs and those thoughts. And so it's so crucial because if we don't address those beliefs and thoughts,
Mhm.
they begin to get worse and they deteriorate and those beliefs and thoughts then impact how we feel. Feelings are such a huge part of our mental well-being, right? That emotional health.
Mhm.
And so I always say it's believe, think, feel, do, right? So there's a belief, and as a result of that belief comes a thought, then follows a feeling, and then a behavior. And we have to address those underlying beliefs and those thoughts in order to actually have really good mental well-being. So many people will come to therapy and they want coping skills, right? They have like, I just want to feel better. And
Mhm.
feeling better is only part of the equation, right?
Right. Yeah.
Because I can absolutely have a session with you. And when you leave that session in that moment, you feel great, right? But we haven't made any change yet to the foundation. And so you're going to always revert back. And that's why this is so crucial to address, because if you don't address the underlying belief, the thoughts that come from that, you're always going to revert back, even if you have coping skills, even if engage in these toxic positivity sayings, right? You will always revert back to status quo if you don't address the root cause. And that is the premise of our mental health.
Absolutely agreed. How do you tackle this as a counselor? So, someone who has to manage so many clients all together and manage their head trash and just the things that you deal with in a session, how do you manage your mental well being and especially when you hold so many roles, not just as a consultant and a CEO, but as a wife, mother, sister? How do you manage it all?
Yeah. So one, I'm gonna say, I also am not without head trash. Okay. So I have head trash just like others, and I have to work through that.
Hmm.
But a huge part of that is just me being aware of myself, right? And so awareness is the first thing, right? I'm always paying
Absolutely.
attention as much as I can to how I'm feeling, what's going on inside of me. Do I feel stressed? Because for so long I got used to functioning at a high level of stress,
Hmm.
so much so that I convinced myself that I wasn't stressed, right? So my threshold for stress became higher and higher, but
Wow.
I was convinced that I wasn't stressed in the moment, right? And that just did not make me a great clinician, a great spouse, a great mom. I was obviously doing the best that I could, but
Hmm.
it kind of came to that point where I realized, okay, you're going to have to stop operating like at this level where if you experience stress, you adjust and then you take the threshold higher, right? That's not the goal, right? The goal is actually for me to be aware of myself, engage in preventive things, figure out what the root causes are the same way I do with my clients, and then get support in doing that. And so I also have a therapist and I have sounding boards, good colleagues. I have a good open communicative relationship with my husband. And so I also have resources for myself and those open relationships where even if there's sometimes that I can't catch it, someone close to me can, right? And they can say, "Hey, slow down. How are you really?" Right? Because if we're not paying attention to ourselves, we can get so far down the road. And when I'm not taken care of, I'm not being as helpful as I could be to clients in session. And
Hmm.
so my motivation in there is always for them to meet their goals and be able to experience freedom in their thinking and this belief in self and seeing their own worth. And that's hard to do when you're not also doing those things and taking care of those things for yourself. So Yeah.
So what are some of your non-negotiables that you do to take care of yourself?
So definitely non-negotiables. Number one, sleep. Like most people, because we think of self and self-care in some ways has come very massages and I'm going to go on a vacation. And that was me. Like, I'm going to go on a vacation, right? And the vacation is going to be how I decompress. And that wasn't it, right? Self-care was about what I was doing for myself on a regular basis. And those things had to be non-negotiables. And so my belief about what I needed had changed. It's not oh, well, let me get these things done and then I'll do this for myself, or let me get this done and then I'll slow down. It was no, slow down, do the thing you need to do for you first, then you have more clarity. You have the ability to prioritize things a little bit better, right? You have the capacity to do all the things that you need to do and delegate the ones that you don't need to do. And so mine is about number one, sleep is so important for me, not just because obviously we all need sleep for health,
Yeah.
but I'm also an empath, right? So every therapist is not an empath, and every person that's an empath is not also a therapist.
Mhm.
And so empaths are, most people know what empaths are, but essentially empaths have the ability to really feel other people's feelings very intensely, right?
Mhm.
And so for me being a therapist and also just naturally feeling people's energy when I walk into a room, right?
Mhm.
I usually pinpoint somewhere in the realm of what's happening with them
Mhm.
pretty quickly. And so that is also very exhausting to me as well. And so sleep for me is probably more important than the average person.
Mhm.
Not to mention, I also was a few years ago diagnosed with ADHD. So I am
Okay.
considered neurodivergent, meaning neurotypical, which is far more common in women my age than most of us realize. And so for years, when I was dealing with anxiety, I used to think, oh, I'm just, I have anxiety, but I'm high functioning. No, no, no. What it was 80 untreated ADHD. So
Mhm.
my mind is creative, right? It's like having, as a matter of fact, one doctor said it's like having a Ferrari engine with bicycle brakes. All
Mhm.
right. And so this Ferrari engine, if you can imagine, probably goes 0 to 100 in
Mhm.
no time. And then imagine trying to slow that down with bicycle brakes, right? So my mind is wanting to take care of everything, do everything, get this done, get that done, take care of this person, take care of that person. And so you throw being an empath into the mix, and I need a lot of sleep. But the only reason I knew that was because I had to get to know myself.
Mhm.
And so sleep is very important for me. I'm not perfect at this yet, but actually eating regularly throughout the day, right? Like having meals. We
Yeah.
get into this like work culture of grinding, and then we skip meals because they're like, oh, well, let me do this, or oh, well, I'm just gonna eat my food while I'm working. And I'm starting to slow down more to enjoy my meals. And in the morning, when I get up, I move leisurely, right? So I get up in enough time that I have time to do my face routine.
Mhm.
And I just feel so much better. Like my skin is all glowy and dewy, right? And it just provides a really good start to my day, right? It changes the headspace that I'm in from the start
Mhm.
of the day. And so, if anything, I would say I invest in all the things I need to prepare myself or set myself up to have a good day, right? To have a productive day, to have good thoughts and feelings, because that gives me bandwidth when the not so great things come along.
Ah, damn. So the ADHD thing, I was not aware that you were diagnosed with ADHD. How do you channel all those creative juices flowing? How do you channel that into your work?
It is a constant work in progress, right? And so I generally will have little reminders for myself, right? That says like, Ferrari engine, bicycle brakes, right? And little affirmations that says every, good thing is not something you need to do right now, right? But I do give myself that space, right? in my days to do things that are a little bit more creative. Like, so for example, although I am a licensed clinician, I'm actually in the process of transitioning out of doing like therapy so consistently. So I'll only probably see about 5 clients a week now.
Mhm.
And then I'll just be doing consulting and teaching other clinicians, like supervising other clinicians who are growing in the field and learning and trying to get their license. Because what I knew about me in this season was I needed a little bit of like respite from that. And I wanted to be able to tap more into my creative juices.
Mhm.
And so what I noticed was going back and forth between clinical and administrative and clinical and administrative, and my day kind of not giving me the opportunity to jump into my creative space was draining me, right? So it was a combination of like you're sitting in people's feelings with them all day, plus you don't have the time to be creative, right? All this stuff is just stored up inside of you and you don't get to explore it. And those two combined was like taking the life out of me, right? And
Wow.
so most of how I manage it really is just about paying attention to my needs and making adjustments, right? So if I notice, like, I always say, like, I was in this phase where I was like, okay, I'm going to skip lunch because I need to get this done. But honestly, if I go ahead and have my lunch and give myself the opportunity to like just eat
Mhm.
and not do work, I'm 10 times more productive, right? If I give myself transition time in between things
Mhm.
and I make sure I'm not jumping back and forth between different types of tasks,
Mhm.
um, it's so much easier for me. And so I say the journey is a little bit different for everyone. There's so many resources out there for ADHD and so many new apps and routine stuff popping up. And here's the thing, there's nothing about ADHD that makes a solid routine a really good idea. It's good to have like an open one, right? That's kind of like general, some things that really help you get your flow. But that boxing the ADHD mind in does not help, right? Because those minds are very creative. So there's a very significant percentage of entrepreneurs who are neurotypical. And I don't think that's by chance.
Interesting. There's this thing that you said about paying attention to your needs and then acting that way. I really like that because we often so just get with the flow and have like let's say like a routine, or forget what our actual needs are, and we do the things that we think we are supposed to be doing instead of actually paying attention to what we need, what our brain and our mind and our body needs. So I really like the fact that you pay attention, and you said that you're paying attention and then scheduling your day around it.
Mhm.
And yeah, you're like changing or making some changes in your career as well to accommodate those needs. So I absolutely love that. Heading back to, so one of your messages that you have over your social media is that the only limit you have is the limit that you set in your mind. So how do you think this plays a role in shaping one's self-esteem, one's self-belief, how they think about themselves? So yeah, could we dwell into that?
Absolutely. So the only limit you have is the one you said. Like I know like people get really caught up in like, oh, that just sounds so cliche, but it's really not, right? When we
Right.
go back to that concept that I shared earlier of believe, think, feel, do,
Yeah.
right? We're
Yeah.
like, well, I can do anything, right? So maybe your mouth says that. Maybe you could possibly even a little bit feel like you could do something, but something's not matching up when
Mhm.
it comes to your actual beliefs and thoughts. So, our brain, 90% of it is our unconscious mind. Like 90% of the information we hold is in our unconscious mind. And then 10% is used for intention. And that's our thinking brain that's like right here at the front.
Mhm.
So when you consider that most of where we're operating from is from our unconscious mind,
Mhm.
think also about how much that is in there that we don't know is there
Mhm.
because it requires intention for us to dig deep enough, right? To
Right.
really know, where did this belief come from? Why do I think I'm not worthy? Right. So a lot of people say, I'm worthy, I'm confident, I'm this, I'm that. And more times than not, when I hear people boast like that a lot, or they end up in the room where they're trying to be the center of attention, it's because they lack confidence or worthiness, not because they are confident or not because they feel worthy. They're
Mhm.
trying to gain it, right? Sometimes we even try to emulate it and we don't realize it. And so, that's one of the things I love about therapy, because they're sitting deeper into the things that we don't know we're sitting with. Like COVID was so necessary in so many ways. Like it was a very scary time. But in terms of it being necessary for us to just have a moment to sit still, it really showed everyone, right, that we don't know how to sit with ourselves.
Yeah.
We're always focusing on, I got to do this, I got to do that, I have this responsibility, I have that responsibility. I'm going with my friends, I'm doing this. There's so many distractions that we have the opportunity to engage in
Mhm.
that we don't even know what's going on within ourselves. And sitting still and sitting with that is the only way we can know that. And that wasn't intentional. And so think of coming to therapy as your way of being intentional about really getting to know yourself and understanding where your beliefs come from and understanding why you think the way you do. Right. As a matter of fact, I go into a lot of things with clients on attachment style, because your primary relationships with your parents or guardians are
Mhm.
actually a huge framework for how you navigate relationships in the future.
Mhm.
So in your mind, you could have had a very healthy relationship with your parents, but there were some areas of that relationship where a need wasn't met.
Mhm.
And now you may be anxious in relationships, or
Absolutely.
now you may be avoiding in relationships, or now you may be anxious and avoiding in the relationship, right? And so all of that, I said all of that to say, right, that like the being intentional about digging deep is necessary, because we don't always know what belief or thought that we're operating from.
So about attachment styles, we'll be dwelling that into another episode with you for sure. That is a very interesting topic, and I don't think enough people, like if enough people knew about what attachment styles is, their relationships would get so much easier because it just makes sense. Your relationships that you have with your guardians, they get reflected in your adult relationships, and just knowing about attachment styles is just so crucial for anyone's well-being in a relationship. So we'll be dwelling into that in another episode for sure. I wanted to talk about it's interesting. So the belief that you have, let's say someone has a lot of head trash, and that leads to a lot of negative thoughts, which lead to a lot of like negative language towards themselves, which affects their self-esteem. So it's a vicious cycle that people go through, right? How do you put a stop to it? Where do you put a stop to it? And as a licensed therapist, what would be your suggestion to help people come out of it?
Yeah, so I'd say it's a process, right? So when you think about our beliefs and our thoughts, right? They don't come from nowhere. So everything can be traced back to something, an experience, a belief, a framework, it's something in our lives, right? We don't just get those things from nowhere. And so the one thing I always remind people is that it's a process, right? It took time to build that foundation of beliefs. It's going to take time to undo it. But the most important thing you need is intention. And so interesting enough, I actually have a little limiting or head trash workbook that I created.
Hmm.
It's just a digital workbook, and it actually takes you through exploring
Hmm.
what negative sitting and spending that time with yourself to understand what your thoughts are in the first place, because you can't do anything about them until you know what beliefs those thoughts came from, right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah, maybe you know the thoughts, but what belief fueled them, right? What belief keeps those thoughts front and center, right? Popping back up. And then once you understand what that belief is, it actually goes through, like, I almost kind of call it a mental boot camp, right? Where you're working on changing it, right? So these beliefs came from repetition or trauma, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
something that was very changing that makes this memorable. It imprinted. And so the only way for us to fully create a new belief is to give ourselves the opportunity to consume that new belief regularly. So
Right.
you're challenging your mind in a very intentional way, right? Actually, sometimes we call it putting thoughts on trial. So what evidence do you have that supports this belief that you're not worthy?
I love that.
And what evidence do you have to support belief that you are worthy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you are choosing to challenge yourself. Challenging the thoughts are the only things that allow you to change them, right? So you identify them and you challenge them and then you replace them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so it's really about moving into that space of intention. And not just letting those negative sit, but being curious, right? It's not, oh, I'm this or oh, I'm that. And I'm like, why? Why are you that? And sometimes my clients are like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, you said you're not worthy, but why are you not worthy? What makes you not worthy? Right? Because now you get to understand what criteria you're using. You're digging deeper, and the digging deeper and really getting to the root is the thing that you start to challenge and the
Right.
thing that you change.
So
Um,
starting to
so
question
it's definitely a
yourself.
process.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. It is definitely
Hmm.
a process. And starting to like question yourself is something that is so crucial. I love that. I love the advice that you shared with us. So if someone has to start somewhere, right? Could you give us like some questions that could help the listeners start dwelling deep into their self-belief and their language that they use? So are there any set of questions that could help them, kickstart their journey into healing?
Yeah. So honestly, I say if you're going to start this journey, learn how to ask the curious questions,
Mm-hmm.
right? And let me tell you, one of the easiest curious questions you've ever heard are the ones you think about kids asking all the time. Why? Well, why? Well, why? Well, why? And you keep asking why until you get to the root. As a matter of fact, there's actually a consulting strategy called 9 whys. And so you keep asking why until there's no why left, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not worthy. Why am I not worthy? What does it mean to be worthy? Well, where did the standards for worthiness come from? Right? And you start asking questions out of curiosity, right? If you believe that like I'm never going to be able to make this work, well, why won't I be able to make this work? And if I can't make it work because I can't do this thing, then why can't I do this thing? Right? And is it even possible? Like maybe it is possible that I could do this thing, right? So you're asking the curious questions so much so that you're going below the surface.
Mm-hmm.
The reason the negative thoughts are allowed to stay there is because we don't go below the surface. We just allow them to run rampant. And so, if anything, the easiest place to start is just asking the curious question, why? Where did that come from?
I love that. I love that so much. So there is a lot that I want to dwell into with attachment styles and boundaries, which is also one of the things that you talk about on like advocate for and everything. But we'll dwell into that in another episode that will be out soon enough. Before we come towards an end of the session, end of the episode, is there anything that I missed out on that you would like to dwell into?
Honestly, not that I can think of, except for the fact that I always like so that statement that we talked about, right? The only limit you have is the one you've set.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to go back to that so much because language is important. And so if there's maybe even a place to start before you identify thoughts, right, is you start saying, how do I talk to myself on a regular basis? Because People usually look at me crazy when I ask that question, but we are talking to ourselves, right? We're running these scripts in our mind constantly. And
Absolutely.
so ask yourself, how do I talk to myself on a daily basis?
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe even write it down. And
Mm-hmm.
then think about someone you really love and you really care about, and you want to see them do well. And then I want you to imagine yourself
Mm-hmm.
saying those horrid things to them.
Yeah,
And chances are, our nature is we can't even imagine saying that with the person that we care about.
absolutely.
And so, if you can't imagine saying that to someone that you care about, why do you say it to yourself?
100% agreed with you. So all of this conversations of ours actually reminds me of the changes that I brought. I've been in and out of therapy for about 5 years, 5 6 years at this point, and something that we so your 9 whys, like the method that you talked about, the asking yourself why continuously. That is something that I did learn when I was 15, and we were just trying to get to the core values, because when you ask why, you get to the root of it, you get to the absolute core of anything, and then you get to realize and get to know yourself better. So one of the things that I've made some changes, like actively made changes, is, let's say, like how I talk to myself. The one that you mentioned, would you talk to yourself like that if it was a loved one, right? So let's say that if I wake up one day, if I have an alarm set and I sleep in, if I don't wake up one day, and if I have a scheduled plan, usually my self-talk would be, oh my god, you're such a loser, you can't even wake up on time, you had an alarm on and everything, you've ruined everything. It would be a really, really, really negative self-talk, and that's how my day would have started. But now that I've worked on my self-talk, and now that I've worked on myself more, now it's like, you know what, it's okay, not the end of the world. It's not bigger commitments have been pushed off. It's okay. I probably needed that sleep. My body probably needed that sleep. So it's good that I slept in. I got the rest that I needed. I deserve to rest. Now let's wake up. Let's see what changes do I need to make to my schedule, and we'll get on with that. So having this dynamic shift from calling yourself a loser and whatnot, and name calling and everything, and having such a negative self talk, to being someone who's so compassionate and kind to myself and stuff like that, it has just made me have a really good relationship with myself. And now it's like
Yeah.
my mind, body, and myself, like, we function together as a unit in a way that serves me well.
Yes, yes, that you mentioned some very, very important things there, right? Like taking that time
Mm-hmm.
to speak well of yourself is so important, right? The reason that we even have these belief systems or these negative thoughts are because of the things that we've experienced, right? And so if we're perpetuating that cycle with more negative, right? I always tell people nothing, no one has ever like been positively motivated by negative talk
Absolutely.
ever.
Yeah.
It might be fear, it might be anxiety, it could be a lot of different things, but there is no positive motivation in negativity. And
Mhm.
so obviously, if you're like, oh, I'm not worth it and I'm not good enough and I can't do this, right? You can't. Only because you said you can't.
Right.
Not because not because it's out of your reach,
Yeah.
but because you decided that it was. And so I did my undergrad, of course, in psychology, and I actually finished it like in 3 years because I was very ambitious and very excited. And so like my first like summer in, I was like taking higher level courses,
Mhm.
and we talked a lot about constructs, right? Social constructs. And one of the things that always stuck with me from the very beginning, I actually wrote a paper on it. It was just the self-fulfilling prophecy and self-efficacy, right?
Yeah.
Self-efficacy is your belief
Mhm.
in your own skills and abilities.
Mhm.
If you have none, you won't go far, right? Your belief is the thing that fuels you. It's like putting gasoline in a car. No one's going to try to drive the car if you're meant to have gas in it. and
Absolutely.
think that you're going to get really far, right? You
Yeah.
can't. I mean, are you just going to cross your fingers and like, oh, okay, the car's going to go, right? No, right? You have to fuel it. And that's how we work. We have to be fueled with the right things to go
Yeah.
far. It's not that we don't have the abilities, it's not that we're equipped. It's just that we're not fueling ourselves. And so, if anything, speak well of yourself because that is the best fuel that you can give yourself.
I 100% agree with you. That is incredibly crucial, and goes a long way, honestly. Yeah.
It does. Yeah. So,
Absolutely agree with you, 100%. So yeah, where can people find you?
yeah, so you can find me on my socials, which I'm getting back on top of posting more now. Finding that balance and all. But on pretty much all of my socials, it's at Amanda Gilchrist underscore LPC. And my website is currently like, down and in process now, but it'll actually be back up soon within a week, but you'll be able to also see my bio link in my Instagram profile. So I am putting out quite a few like digital workbooks and things. So if you want some resources, I mean, when I say I'm giving the basically giving them away, it's just a nominal fee really for hosting the sites that I sell the products on, but like digital, beliefs workbooks, my head trust workbook for like, a few bucks. And it's just a way to invest in yourself and really learn how to start having those conversations. And so my goal has always been to help as many people as I possibly can. And I know that, that doesn't mean I'll be doing one-to-one work with them, but just sharing some things just from my own experiences and, of course, my knowledge base from doing the clinical work. But we all deserve an opportunity to really get to know ourselves. And with the cost of things these days, right? I understand that therapy is not always accessible for everyone, but I wanted there to be something in between the gap, right? So
Mm.
if you need therapy, right, you still like, people say they don't need therapy, but everyone can benefit from it. That's what I'll say, right? And just because you go to therapy doesn't mean you have to have a mental health diagnosis, but there are so many things that you are capable of that I would love for people just to be able to do for themselves. And so I'm trying to put the resources out there so you know what to do and how to do it.
That is wonderful. I'll be linking all the socials down below in the show notes of that episode. And yeah, do reach out to her. Check out the resources for sure. And thank you so much for your time, Amanda. Thank you so much for being here. I had a wonderful time talking about it. I can't wait to dwell into attachment styles and boundaries with you in another episode. So super stoked for that. And yeah, to anyone who has made it till the end, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Yeah, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. If you're listening to this on Spotify, you know the drill. If you're listening to this on Spotify, and if you like the episode, do give us a 5-star review. It helps us reach out to other fellow listeners who might be interested in mental health topics. And if you're listening to this on YouTube, don't forget to share, subscribe, and comment down below what resonated with you the most. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you so much. Thank you, Amanda, again, for your time and energy. And yeah, I'll speak with you soon.
Thank you.